I was in the Army, trained at Fort Lewis and Fort Sam Houston uh, in, I think it was 2 months of medical training, and was assigned to an Army hospital on a Navy ship. There were 3 Navy ships in the Pacific in World War II, Hope, Mercy, and the Comfort. And they had Army hospitals on them. And that was a unique experience. So in my joking times, I said, yes, I was in the Navy as well as the Army, but it was technically in the Army. It was a grand experience. Got to see things that very few rural people from Idaho would get to see. The camaraderie was somewhat limited. I've never kept up with any but one person that I came across later. Our paths crossed. But it was fine. I never got crossways with people. I didn't get any Article 15 or court-martial, and survived it, and that was a feat in itself. Yeah, I went in April of 45 and I got out December of 46, so a little less than 2 years, and got out in demobilization after World War II. So that was a little less than 2 years, and we didn't have limits at that time. One of my friends that I met later was in only 15 months, but he had to be recalled because he had been in less than 18 months. So I felt honored that I got my 18 plus months in, and he had to go back in and serve after he got his medical degree.
Tell us what happened after.
Oh, even before going, I'd decided that I wanted to be a physician, so I went to college and got into medical school, and then decided I wanted to do country medicine. So I practiced 2 years in rural Missouri, in the Ozarks. That time I had a nurse wife, and we were kids out there trying to establish a medical career, and that was a growing experience also. After 2 years, my friend in Ohio persuaded me to come join him in the psychiatric training, so we went to Columbus, Ohio for that training. Stayed on 3 years afterward, then decided we wanted to come back home to the West Coast. When we came back to Oregon after being in Ohio, Damage State Hospital was brand new. Worked there a year, but a man who had been my chief and a mentor in Ohio had subsequently moved to California. He was the chairman of psychiatry department at Loma Linda University School of Medicine. He asked me to come join him, and that was a tremendous experience, being around not only psychiatrists but the whole medical staff. And I had the unique opportunity to be with a lot of medical patients at that time. I was assigned to be the consultant on the medical surgical wards, and so it wasn't just psychiatric patients, but it was anyone on medical surgical ward who was depressed, anxious, suicidal, threatening to leave the hospital against advice. Call Carnahan and see what he can do with this person. So it was a very unique experience. Was I got along in years, and also they built a new VA hospital by us. We were mandated to spend time there, so I began to spend more and more time with veterans. And that was a very unique experience. The first ones we saw, of course, were World War II and Korean veterans. They had their own issues, but they had been back home for a while. But that was about the time that the Vietnam veterans started coming back. We didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know what to do with us. It was a bad fit. And that's the time that the vet centers were established. The Vietnam veterans lobbied to get vet centers established, which were basically just storefront drop-in places. And they were run by fellow veterans who understood their situation, their unique situation. And by and by, we began to get a feel for it too. And some these Vietnam veterans are now my best friends, but it wasn't so in the beginning when they first started coming home. They were quite different from the veterans we'd had before, with unique problems, and too many of them had drug problems too, and it took a while for us to get to where we could work together. The World War II experience was very different in that there are many factors, of course, but the soldiers and sailors in World War II were generally trained as units, went as units, served as units, came home as units. Wasn't generally true in Vietnam. They went over as individuals and were replacements, and had to serve a year and sometimes 13 months and get out of there. Some elected for another term, but that was not true in World War II and in Korea. They were there until the mission was accomplished or until they were wounded or injured and had to be evacuated. So the mental set was different. The war was different. The reception on coming home was very different. In the previous wars, they were welcomed. They came home, and too many of the Vietnam veterans were abused in coming home. Well, it's terrible. It's unconscionable if you want to think about people who had served and did what they were sent to do, and then treated so shabbily on coming home. It's bad. A lot of Vietnam veterans that I've seen subsequently never felt welcomed home. And now they go to celebrations and say, "Welcome home, soldier," and they see this as a totally new, unique experience. Well, in retrospect, I'm sure that I prescribed too many medications, okay? My lighter moments, let's say I poisoned too many people. But no, I tried to get acquainted with them, and as much as they would let me, but it's a frightening experience for someone who's been in combat to come back to a civilian and someone who may or may not know the military experience, certainly didn't have the experience this individual had, and how much are they going to share? A lot of them think they don't have anything to share. And I've had many say, "I thought I was okay. It was the other people who were all fouled up and messed up in their lives, not me." So it took some very, well, difficult and maybe even legal situations for them to say, "I guess I am messed up and I'd better take time to unravel some of these things." I've had the privilege of a lot of people beginning to open up with me and tell me things that they had not shared before, things they need to share. I call it releasing their demons so that they could move on in life. After coming to Bend, we had a different mix of people. First, there were very few World War II people coming into the clinic, at least in my department, and few of the Koreans. I can think of several, but mostly Vietnam veterans. And so I made it my business to get acquainted with them, and it was on a different level than my previous assignments. Coming into this situation, I was on a contract basis. I wasn't really an employee, having already taken retirement, and I became one of the veterans. And the boundary lines were pretty fuzzy. Some of them were my friends, and some of them were my clients, some were both, which I had not had that experience in previous locations. In fact, two of my best friends now are Vietnam veterans that became my motorcycle buddies, and others too. And we go out to dinner, we might invite these people to dinner. So it gave me a unique experience too, to get acquainted with veterans on a level that I had not gotten acquainted with them on before, and share some of their things, get acquainted with their families, and know some of the unique experiences that they had. That brings us up, though, to the current soldiers, who I call the new guys, the ones from the current conflict. They are a lot like the Vietnam guys when they come back. Most of them wanted to put the wartime stuff behind them and get on with life, but it's a hard transition moving from the mentality of combat military, moving into a situation, home and community, with civilians, and it's a real adjustment time. Some will embrace that and work on it, and I have some who will just, they either want to be ignored, or they want to get compensation, or they want their goodies and be left alone otherwise. So the real goal is to get people to look at what's happening with them, look at their options, and make adjustments that will allow them to meet their goals and meet their family needs as well. I don't know what these individuals were promised when they went in the military. They say they had promises that haven't been kept. But there were promises made, and there were expectations that they had. Some of these can be met, some cannot be met. I come from the VA. There are other places out there that there are other ministries and so forth. Point Man Ministries has done a very good job helping some of these veterans in a way that the VA can't. But from a veterans, VA, I'm saying, there are a lot of resources being committed by the VA to help these veterans. Is it enough? Probably not. Is it the right kind? Well, the VA is working on it. It's not perfect, but there are services available. I've seen a great change in the attitude of the VA from the time I started working with the VA, which would be in the late 70s. The VA was a hard bureaucracy, and a lot of people didn't feel very welcome coming to the VA. And I had a Vietnam veteran tell me just a few years ago. He said one of the worst experiences of his life was taking his father, World War II veteran, to the VA hospital and clinic in New York. So now when he needs care, what did he do? He said, I dreaded coming to the VA, but he said it has changed. He just feels very welcome coming to our clinic. He enjoys the people, and has dropped all those previous barriers about and ideas and experiences that he had that were so negative from New York. Well, I've seen the same thing happen in California. As the VA got more involved in treating first Vietnam veterans and then the current ones, there was a great push on, and I credit Jesse Brown with this. He was a Vietnam veteran himself, and he did a lot to change the attitude of the VA to make it a friendly place for someone to visit. Not all feel that way, but I've seen many who wouldn't go no other place to get their medical care. They feel that positive about it, and they enjoy interacting with the VA personnel. So I felt very good about what's happened here in the Bend Clinic too. Well, I have to give a lot of credit to the team here, and specifically Stu Steinberg, because he's been a very active person in seeing that people got benefits, treatment and benefits for their needs. The bureaucracies have their own issues. They have to have rules, but also there are people interpreting those rules, and some are very friendly and others are more interested in the bureaucracy than they are with the individual. That gets played out in the media too, that you have seen. So anyway, there are people around, Stu Steinberg being the specific example locally, who get very aggressive and militant in getting the attention at the VA level in the treatment benefits branches for what the veteran needs and what he can get. I appreciate those individuals. I've enjoyed working with them. I do everything I can to serve that in writing notes and letters to help back up those I would say the legal attempts to get the needed treatment. The benefits branch is interesting also. I even had the experience of a man from the benefits branch visiting me in the office saying, I want to help this veteran, and I think we can if we just change the wording some and emphasize this experience and this need. I think we can rate him. So we worked on that, and I collaborated with him. And then I asked him, well, this is very interesting. You go to all this trouble. How about the others out there? He said, some are just in the bureaucracy. They just do what the bureaucracy does and take no personal interest in it. But so there are people of different mindsets and different, commitments at these different levels. PTSD is an interesting thing that it was not in the nomenclature until the 70s. This condition's always been around. If you read history, and Jonathan Shea is a psychiatrist in Boston, and he read Homer, and he read about Achilles and Odysseus and so forth, and their experiences. They had some of the same conditions that his soldiers were having. So it's not new, and they called it by different names, called it in World War, in Civil War, and then World War II, they called it combat fatigue. And so when the term post-traumatic stress disorder came on in the late 70s, it was still something that was new and had to be defined not only on the diagnostic level, but on the treatment level and on the rating level. I well recall a man coming out from the rating board to our hospital there at Loma Linda saying, well, we haven't been able to rate people for PTSD. And really? So we'd have to put something like nervousness or psychosis or some traditional label on them in order to get them rated. And so this was a struggle in the system on the treatment level, and then being transferred to the benefits level to get people the treatment and the benefits that they really deserved. So we've seen this in transition from the time it was introduced to the present time. When I was at the Roseburg VA, we were able to get a dedicated PTSD unit, 10 beds. And it was modeled after the Palo Alto VA system. And the hands-on director of that program came from Palo Alto. They had a psychologist who was the formal head of it, and I signed off on it as chief of psychiatry. But this was a new thing in the treatment, and the VA discovered that 1 month of treatment was as good as 3 months, as long as they had follow-up and the option of coming back in if they needed to. So this program has served a lot of people in Oregon, and I think it was very well run as it developed anyway, and it was nearly all Vietnam veterans at first. The last report I got is that we're, I think, 80% of what I call the new veterans, and only 20% of the Vietnam veterans in the last batch that I got a report on. So it's more than medicine. Medication has helped some of the symptoms, but they need to be involved in discovery and growth with other veterans. Well, the search is still on for the most effective way of treating PTSD. And there are all kinds of approaches, novel and otherwise, and eye movement desensitization and movement. And one person was telling about his experience in getting great relief by fly fishing, which was other movement that would have some similarity. And always medical institution want to give medicines. But I've had the mantra of saying that skills are better than pills, and if you don't learn some skills of living, even if you get benefit from the pills, it's going to be temporary, and you'll soon be back needing more or different medication. So I will always champion the people who are in there learning new ways of living and new ways of approaching their symptoms. I like to see people learning new skills of living. I say skills are a lot better than pills. And if you don't learn skills, these pills are not going to be effective forever. You're going to run out of them, or you're going to need different ones or stronger ones or something to deal with your symptoms. And if you learn skills of living, your reliance on medication is going to be far less.